folks, my name is Jen, and today we're going to do a somewhat, hopefully quick wrap-up of everything that I read in November. So it is December 1st. I honestly can't believe that we are here already. I am in the midst of panicking because I am very behind in Christmas work, so this is going to be hopefully a quick-ish, slightly distracted wrap-up of everything I read in November. I did not read that much. I read like 4 books. I have been reading a lot of different things this month. I started reading The Great Houdini, which is obviously a book about Houdini. I only got a chapter or so in, but it's interesting. I made, pretty good progress in Good Stuff, which is a memoir about Cary Grant by his daughter. This one, I don't know what to feel about this one. I was very excited about it, but at this point, I don't know. I'm gonna soldier on through, because I really don't want to DNF it, but at this point, it's just a lot of, it feels like a lot of our life was so charmed stuff, and I think I'm figuring out why a lot of celebrities tend to have ghostwriters or people helping them with things, maybe to help them not sound so pompous. I'm assuming that's part of the reason. Yeah, I'll have more thoughts eventually about that, because it could improve and I could be just being a butthead. I did go back to Time Cat by Lloyd Alexander, but I only read one more chapter in it, and that was as far as I got. And then I did also start Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin, and it's a collection of essays. I got a couple of essays in, and I'm really loving this book a lot, but I'm taking my time going through it. I, early in the month, made some more progress in The Moonstone, but to be completely honest, I didn't get as much reading in that done as I would have liked. And I am still doing, I believe I said, a buddy read of Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens. I am currently behind by a few chapters, but still working my way through that. And on to the books that I actually read. Let's see, what did I read? From all different, were they all different genres? Yeah, I wasn't sure if I'd count this one as a fantasy, but I guess it's kind of more literary fiction. So I read a literary fiction book, middle grade fantasy, a nonfiction book, and an erotica audiobook. So what I read, actually, it was one that I finished reading. It was The Witches by Roald Dahl. I started this, when was that, last year, I think it might have been, and then for some reason I just had a hard time getting into it any longer, and I just stopped reading it. But in an effort this week to try to get rid of some books on my nightstand of shame, because I actually just went through everything on here, so I could fit all of my books for my winter TBR onto the shelf. I had to put away all of the unread books from my unsuccessful fall TBR, and I moved everything in, and I was trying to get through some of my unread books, and I only managed to really finish one of them, which was The Witches. I had read this, I think, when I was a small child, because I read a whole bunch of Roald Dahl's books when I was a kid, and I didn't remember most of it. I remembered portions of it, but I remembered a definite circumstance with the ending. but I didn't remember everything about, like, that was said in that last chapter, so that was kind of like a new experience, I guess, because it's been so long since I've read this book. I guess what I remember more about this story is probably the movie, and I don't mean the recent Anne Hathaway venture. I actually have not watched that one, because I am very partial to the one that was made in the 80s, I think it was, starring Angelica Houston as the Grand Master Witch. She is absolutely horrifying in that movie. That movie actually scared the ever-loving shit out of me when I was a kid. I fucking loved it. There is truly some really, really horrifying scenes in that movie. Like the traumatic things that happen to a couple of the kids, the scary way that the witches look in it, the meeting of all the witches, and subsequent things that happen to people. It's a lot. I'm prattling on. You may or may not know what The Witches is actually about. The Witches is basically following this boy. Is his name ever given? He's telling the story. I actually don't know if he's ever named in here now that I think about it. My cat just threw open the door like she was Angelica Houston entering a room, so that's pretty hilarious. You want a taste of how this lady looks? That's kind of how she looks. I'd say the movie is equally as horrifying. Anyway, there's this boy. I don't think he's ever really named in here because his grandmother basically calls him like darling and stuff like that the entire time. Anyway, his grandmother is Norwegian, but he was born in England, I believe. His parents leave him to be cared for by his grandmother while they go on a trip, and unfortunately they are killed in an accident on the way back, and so now he and his grandmother are all they have in the world. So they are staying in Norway, and I think in the movie the circumstances are slightly different, but I believe they end up going back to England for a particular reason. I think most of it has to do with her health. Again, I started reading this last year, so I can't really remember all of the beginning of the book, but she spends time telling him stories about her childhood, and then also ends up talking to him about witches, and because I guess people in Norway are more superstitious about witches. I can't confirm, I don't know. They end up going to the seaside for his grandmother's health, to take like a holiday, and his grandmother's told him all about the existence of witches. He has had an encounter, and they're very different from like different tales and stuff like that. Sorry, I'm going to be multitasking while I talk to you. I am knitting a scarf. It's like resort, and she has informed him, and he has encountered a witch already, and they're very different. They're like, they wear gloves indoors because they have claws for hands. They wear wigs because they're actually bald, so they're always itching under their hair, which you can tell are actually wigs. And they have no toes, they just have square ends of their feet, but they don't want to wear like square-toed shoes because that would give them away, so they wear pointy shoes, but they always look like they're pained, and they think that children smell like dog droppings. I don't know. These are just some facts of witches in this particular Roald Dahl universe. So that's the story on that. They're at the resort, and in comes a whole bunch of witches, including the Grand Mistress Witch herself. And shenanigans ensue, some of which probably kind of traumatic. Anyway, I'm sure that a bunch of you who are probably my age, maybe a little older, were also equally traumatized by the movie from, again, I think it was in the 80s. If you're younger than me, you might have also been traumatized by that, depending on if your relatives showed you that like mine did. This book, I think the reason why I stopped reading it was because I was kind of not quite in the mood. You know, I think sometimes Roald Dahl's books, as whimsical as they are, I think sometimes you don't really take the time to think about how traumatic actually a portion of it might be. I think a lot of the time, like maybe not something like The Vicar of Nibbleswick exactly. That overall I think is like pretty funny, but you know, if you really take the time to think about like Matilda, not spoiler warning for any of these books, but I'm sure that most of you are adults and you either experienced these books in your childhoods or you don't really care. There's like traumatic shit in these books. So you know in Matilda how her family just really truly seems to hate her, basically, about her. Which that's pretty crazy. Like, besides the fact that you have, you know, the everything to do with Miss Honey and Miss Trunchbull, that kind of like scary stuff that's implied. But then again, Matilda's family from her brother, although I think for the most part her brother just ignores her. Her mom and dad are fed up with her. They are threatened by her, to be honest, and they're just kind of insufferable. And then at the end of the book, of course, they leave her with Miss Honey. In the movie, there's like adoption papers involved, I'm sure, because like was a little bit different in the 90s. But in the book, they just leave her with Miss Honey, and they just leave. They just turn around, they don't even look back, and they leave, and there's nothing. She's just with Miss Honey. And then if you look at Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I guess in some parts Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, like the poverty of the Buckets, and it's said very simply at one point, I think Mr. Bucket, does he lose his job? I think he loses his job because of either layoffs or the factory shut down or something, I can't quite remember, where he works, because he's living in the book. In the movie it's implied that he probably passed away. He's laid off and has to, like, I think shovel walkways or something to make money, and it's less money than what he made at the factory, and it's just, they are starting to starve. Things are really dire conditions. Some of the, honestly, things that happen to the shitty kids in the factory, very much deserved, I think, but at the same time, kind of scary, kind of dark. And then, you know, you have something like The Witches, where, spoiler alert, but the group of witches are meeting because it's their annual meeting, and the Grand High Witch is like, has developed a formula to turn the children of England into mice. And of course, no one but them will know that the children were turned into mice. And therefore, everyone around them, including their own parents, will instantly squish them, not realizing that those are their children. They're just evil mice. And our hero of the book also gets turned into a mouse. Now, in the movie, it's a little bit different. If I remember correctly, I think he ends up turning back into a boy. In the book, he is a mouse forever. And he, in the very, like, last chapter or so of the book, he has to come to terms with the fact that he is not going to live that long because mice don't live that long. And he has to come to the terms with that. But then he's okay with that because he doesn't want to live longer than his grandmother is going to be around. And it's like, holy shit, it's traumatic as fuck. And I don't remember that from when I was a kid, so I'm going to assume that either that was like a lot for me and I blocked it out, or I did not understand because I was little. Yeah, I don't know, but that's pretty fucked. And I guess that's in some ways part of what I always really liked about this kind of writing as a kid, because it's whimsical and hilarious, and there's usually just absolutely bonkers shit happening, but then all of a sudden there's like some dark, like underlying shit that's going on too. And I was not, as a kid, a fan of incredibly depressing stories or like fairy tales. Like, I was definitely not a Hans Christian Andersen kid. I did not want to cry. But I was very much a Grimm's fairy tales child who really liked kind of darker shit. Mostly because it usually happened to the bad guys in the story. I don't know what that says about me. Probably a lot. I know that that's really why I liked Roald Dahl stories, and why I tended to really like a lot of British children's stories and stuff, because they oftentimes tend to go a little bit dark with stuff where the humor is very particular. Reading it now as an adult, that just struck me as like, holy fuck. I did enjoy it. You know, I think that it was a very interesting tale, although I will admit that I don't think it's one of my favorites. Of these, I think my favorite would still probably be like Matilda or the Charlie books. So I think, yeah, it's probably one of those, but it still was, you know, an interesting book to read, albeit a little bit dark, and reminded me again of that absolutely horrifying fucking movie that I really liked watching as a kid, even if I watched a portion of it like this. I don't really know what to say about this other than I enjoyed my reading of it again, even if I read both halves of it at different, like, spaced out periods. I think that overall it was fairly enjoyable, even though, like I said, it's not my favorite doll book, and that ending is kind of fucked up the more you think about it, I guess. Interesting, and I always like the little whimsical details or ridiculous insults that are always worked in when characters are feeling some type of way. Just absolutely ridiculous insults and things. I think those are honestly the most memorable, probably. But yeah, The Witches I ended up giving like 4 stars, because I thought anything less than that would be me looking too harshly at a book that's for kids, that admittedly I know I loved when I was younger, even if it's like something that is maybe not as much of my cup of tea now. Maybe I'll talk about this one next. The literary fiction. So this is the first book that I read in November. All of the books that I read are actually very short this month. This one is Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I got this when we went to the book barn. This is a book that I had heard about on the podcast Books Unbound with Ariel and Raylene, who you might recognize them from BookTube, although I don't think Raylene has one anymore. And Ariel has mostly moved over to making videos about renovating her like 150 some odd year old house. Really cool. But anyway, so this is a book that has been talked about a lot on the podcast. It's definitely an Ariel book. I know she reads and tends to talk about like cool books, but oftentimes very kind of, I don't know, strange books, kind of avant-garde books. And honestly, I go for whimsical, I go for weird and funny, but I am not usually someone that goes for avant-garde books. I don't particularly, not usually my cup of tea, because I never know how to feel about them. I'm sure that's probably part of the point. I saw this, there was actually like, I don't know, 7, 8 copies or something in, at this location, and I was like, what the hell? So, yeah, I took that as a sign, and I picked this up, and it's definitely something. This is a book by Richard Bach. It also is full of, like, photographs of, the seashore and seagulls, and this is about a seagull, named Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and he is a seagull that thinks for himself. Like, he knows that everyone in, like, the flock and around, basically, they fly for the purpose of sustenance and survival. They don't fly for pure enjoyment. They don't really learn tricks. They don't do anything beyond comes naturally for them as seagulls. In fact, like, a lot of the times it seems like their flight, while they do use it to, like, hunt for food and stuff like that, for the most part they fly around searching for scraps. It's oftentimes what a lot of it is. And Jonathan's different because he wants to push the boundaries. He wants to see what he can do. So he starts flying, learning new ways of flying. How high can he go? What speeds can he get up to? What tricks can he learn? Learning particular ways how he can improve at actually hunting for food based on how he is flying, the speed at which he is entering the water, and, like, all that jazz. Just learning a lot of things, and he is ultimately shunned from his flock for pushing the boundaries and not conforming. That is kind of where things get real fucking weird. I don't know how to talk about this book without really giving spoilers. Let me see. I'm gonna look at my review I posted to see if I can do this without really spoiling anything. So, yeah, things get stranger from there. So, for such a very short book, it's very thin. It has 3 parts to it. 3 acts, I guess. So the first act is, yes, it's him pushing the boundaries, learning what he can about flight, being shunned, going out on his own, basically doing his own type of thing. And then the second act graduates into... Is that a spoiler that I guess it's kind of a spoiler, but not exactly. Let's just say that he moves on to another plane of existence, I guess, and the story you would think would end. It does not. It continues from there, and things get kind of more bizarre, and that's the second act. And then the third act, again, changes, and it's bizarre. It was definitely a very different reading experience. Like, I've never read anything like this before. I still don't 100% know how I feel about the book in its entirety. I think it is something that I will go back to, not anytime soon, but maybe in a couple of years I will go back to it and see how I feel about it. I am also trying to I think I'm mostly convinced my husband to pick this up because I think he will enjoy it immensely. Yeah, it's very strange, and like I said, it's very short, so it's also just, I read it in like a couple of sittings, and it's very strange. And at first I was really enjoying that strangeness and uniqueness of it, and I was like, I wasn't really sure where this was gonna go, especially when it started transitioning into Act 2. I was like, what the fuck is this book going? Like, what is happening? And then Act 2, I think, was probably, honestly, mostly my, my least favorite? I guess kind of my least favorite section of the book. Just because, like, things got kind of philosophical. And to be completely honest, I don't do philosophy. I don't really like a lot of philosophy and philosophical discussions, readings, things like that. I guess you could take this as maybe I'm just not smart enough for it. But I think more of what it has to do with is it's not that I can't wrap my brain around stuff, which, I mean, a portion of it is, yeah, my brain doesn't want to wrap around that. But for the most part, philosophy stuff tends to leave me with an underlying sense of dread. I think that's the main problem, is that really delving into the purpose of existence tends to fill me with such existential dread. I feel like I need to crawl in my own fucking skin. Yes, there are times when I don't mind feeling like a tiny insignificant grain of sand in the great wide beach of the universe. I don't really mind that at certain times if this is something that I've come to through conclusions of my own or through just other different books or media things or stuff like that. Like, I don't always mind that, or feeling like that through experiences, revelations while out in nature, or like when I was a teenager and we went to Mexico and I sat on top of was it the Temple of the Dead? I think it was a temple that my classmates and teacher were climbing, and I got vertigo and I had to stop 3/4 of the way up because I felt like I was going to fall off the world. But just sitting there and looking out across everything and touching that pyramid that was older than anything I'd ever experienced ever in my life, you really start to feel how tiny and insignificant you are in the world. That's fine. It feels weird. It's a little bit seasickness, but it's fine and it's beautiful and it's a wonderful, life-changing experience. Having to, like, address life's purposes are not purposes, or just think about all of this and come to conclusions that maybe nothing matters, like, that's a lot for me. To be completely honest, that's a lot for me. That's a lot for my anxiety. And when something does tend to get very philosophical, it causes me an attack of the 3 a.m. thoughts. And what I mean by the 3 a.m. thoughts are either I have been unable to get to sleep and I have stayed up that late thinking terrible, horrifying, anxious thoughts, or it's 3:30 a.m., I've woken up with a start, used the bathroom, and now I can't get back to sleep because those intrusive thoughts start to come in and you start to question why we do anything at all. Not great. Personally, for me, I don't know how it is for you out there in the wide world, but it's a lot. All of that tends to make me end up feeling extremely claustrophobic. And again, like, I need to crawl out of my fucking skin. So this book got me feeling like that, and I was like, man, maybe I need to fucking DNF this. Actually, that's where I put it down for the first sitting, because, like, I was like, I need to chill. And when I came back to it again, I was like, no, do you see the state of this book? This book is, how long is this? Literally 128 pages. How the hell could I DNF a book that is 128 pages, and a good portion of those don't even have any words on them? They're taken up by black and white photographs of flying seagulls. I can't give up on it. So I persisted, and I made it through the rest of Act 2 and moved on to Act 3, and that is about where I was like, oh, okay, I think I might actually like this weird little book. It took another turn. When I finished I think it was basically the last sentence or so of this book, I was like, well, damn it, you know, you brought me back here. It was actually a very brilliant little book. Had to take you through the existential dread to get there, but actually very brilliant. I didn't have any more dread at that point. I'd had laughter from a couple of parts because there were a couple of observations or like things that were said that I was like, holy shit, what? Just very entertaining. And I see what the author was trying to do here. Maybe a little heavy-handed with what he was trying to do, but still, like, interesting. I will say I would not call this a new favorite. I would not call this, like, something that I would recommend to everyone, because I definitely would not. Like I said, I think I've convinced my husband to give it a try. He doesn't read that many books, but it is short enough, and I think the contents of it he would enjoy, because he does tend to like things that are a little more philosophical and stuff. So I think that, yeah, I'd recommend it to him, and I don't know who else I would recommend it to. But, yeah, it's not something I would suggest to everyone. But, still a very interesting read. I definitely, like I said, no, this is one that I'm 100% going to be picking up again in a couple of years, just to revisit it and see how I feel about it now, see if I get anything more out of it, see if nothing gives me dread anymore. Very interesting book. I don't know, if you like philosophical books, if you like really weird books, I guess check this out. I ended up giving that one, what did I give it? 4 stars. And then next book, my nonfiction, is very New Orleans. This is a celebration of history, culture, and Cajun country charm. And it's by Diana Hollingsworth Gessler. And this is a book that my bestie brought me back. She went to New Orleans over like Halloween and brought me back this little book, and I very much enjoyed it. It's just a really cool book. I really like books about different places that I would love to visit, and I definitely really found the charm in here, because it is beautifully illustrated. It's got like this kind of watercolor look to it, and it's just really gorgeous. Let me see if I can find some better pictures. And I like that it's not just about like specific places. Like you have the Café du Monde, which of course has the famous beignets, obviously. And then it's also got like maps of the areas, and it's told in like sections, and I really love that it's got those things, but then it also has background information and also other different charming parts of New Orleans. Like this tells you about the architectural details of a lot of the structures. This one has like different businesses and things that are made in the French Quarter, so you have more information on that. Then they have different restaurants, different dishes and things. They talk to you about different historical things, and they have stuff about historical stuff, different like historical houses and buildings, all the different areas. Like I said, there's a zoo, and they'll give you some of the history of New Orleans and different places, all while, again, these beautiful watercolors. So I really loved this, not only because it showed some like places that would be wonderful to visit, which I would like to go to New Orleans at some point, and some of these places I'd known about already and were definitely already on like my mental list of, man, it would be great to go there. but some more places I did find some more to add to that mental list. And I also, like I said, really appreciated different facts about the area, or different like background information. Like this section right here is about the swamp and the animals and plant life and everything having to do with the swamp. And then like they've got different like information about the zoo animals, or these sections and all of the restaurants. And it's got like there's some stuff about slang in here. There's different like, yeah, locations and facts about the city, and like things that are like landmarks, like different landmarks, and not just like actual landmarks, but like actual landmarks, like historical things, or famous restaurants, or buildings, houses, stuff like that. But it also gives like shops, or like special things. Like there's a section right at the beginning that talks about things you'll see, like Jackson Square being the heart of New Orleans. It tells you what you'll find there. So you'll find artists, you'll find maybe bridal parties going through, you'll see mimes, you'll see all different kinds of like entertainers, jazz bands, just lots of different things. And I really loved that and found this, like I said, to be incredibly charming. Is there more information that I wish could be in here? Perhaps, because this just gives you a taste of New Orleans, basically. Yeah, I wish there was more information, and that's why I ended up giving this like 4 stars instead of like 5, just because I wish there was more information that was crammed into here. But at the same time, this was absolutely charming and delightful. Like I said, it gave me more ideas of things that I would want to visit, maybe someday if I ever get there, and just giving like a beautiful look at New Orleans, and not just like maybe the special touristy things, but also just the parts of what make New Orleans New Orleans. So it was just really cool. The artwork in here is gorgeous, and I really enjoyed reading this. And that brings me to my last book of the month, and that was actually an audiobook. So I can't remember exactly how I found this particular thing. I think it might have popped up on my phone, because I was like posting something on Instagram. It was a book tag challenge thing that I was tagged in, and I had to answer like questions with certain books, and I was looking for a particular book to answer a question, and I think while I was doing that, this podcast popped up, and I was like, wait, this exists? The podcast, which I've only just started listening to, the podcast is called Pounded in the Butt by My Own Podcast. And it's a Night Vale Presents, I guess, and it is Chuck Tingle. So Chuck Tingle, if you didn't know, wrote? I don't know, he definitely wrote a lot of erotica. I don't know if he's still writing erotica, is the thing, because I know he's come out with like 2 novels recently, and I think I have both of them marked on my to-read list, because I'm interested to see like more serious works, I guess. One of them I think is a mystery, and I can't remember what the other one is. A lot of his books are erotica, but not like, I'd say they are erotica in the way that, what is it, that book that came out in 2020, is it Kissed by the Coronavirus? It's more along the veins of how that erotica is, as opposed to maybe something a little more serious erotica, like all about the titillation. This is not so much, I mean, I guess some of it is titillating, but I think for the most part it's meant for just pure entertainment value because it's hilarious. So I know at the root of it, as it is stated multiple times in the podcast, and I know has been stated in other places I've seen things, Chuck Tinkle's focus is on spreading love. So, it's, oh my god, it's just so funny. So, anyway, this podcast, basically, each episode is a different one of his novels being read. So, for example, it does not have that many episodes, so I'm going to be through this fairly quick, I think. The first episode was Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt, which might be his first book, I think, and that was read by Cecil Baldwin. And then the second episode is Butt Wars, Rogue Buns, and it's read by Mara Wilson, who, by the way, was the little girl in Matilda. Hilarious. I've only gotten, like, I don't know, 2 minutes into that one, so yeah. But, so, because they're podcast episodes, but they're reading his erotica, I'm counting them as audiobooks, because it literally is someone reading his book, so thereby it counts as an audiobook. Wow, you guys. Hilarious. I have read 5 other of his books before. Those were ebooks. What were they? I think 3 or 4 of them were like COVID specials. So they were ones that he wrote during, while everybody was quarantining. And then the other one was one I found online. So they were hilarious, but I did not rate them at the time because I didn't know how to rate them, because I didn't know if I was supposed to rate them by level of writing, if I was supposed to be rating them by level of entertainment value and hilarity, if I was supposed to be rating them by titillation level, because I don't read that many erotic books. I would say the majority of things I read with spice in them are romance novels, and I rate them by an entirely different metric. The spice level does come into account at times, especially whether or not it was very cheesily done, or poorly done, or lack thereof of spice, and not letting us know anywhere on the book that it was a clean romance. Like, that really gets my goat. But yeah, so I rate, but everything else comes into account too: entertainment value, writing, the characters, of course, any growth, stuff like that. I don't know how to rate Chuck Tingle's writing, because I kind of see Chuck Tingle's writing as, I'm sorry, this is shaking because Banks is bathing herself right now. I tend to see Chuck Tingle's writing as similar to like an episode of Saturday Night Live. I think on some level it has a lot of, I still think on some level it has a lot of merit, but I wouldn't entirely know how to properly rate it on varying scales, because there's a lot of factors, and I don't know, I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly. I didn't rate this, like I have not rated any of his other erotica that I have read, because again, I don't know how, but I will say that I did enjoy listening to the audiobook a lot more than I had enjoyment out of reading the ebooks. And the reason for that is purely because it's just so entertaining to hear not only the narrator crack up, but also the audience, I guess probably in the studio while he was reading it, listening to them react or crack up at the same time. I just found that to be more of an enjoyable experience than just reading this on my own. So if I was going to rate it, it would have a slightly higher rating than the ebooks that I've read, just purely for that entertainment value. Anyway, I tend to like that, like, maybe that's why I compared it to SNL a little bit, because some of my favorite things are when you see clips of people losing character at any point because they're so amused by everything. Yeah, that's probably why I connected those two in my brain. Anyway, it was, like I said, it's unrated because I don't know how to rate his books. I will say, he actually speaks, he introduces, like, the episodes and things, and I don't know who Chuck Tingle is. I do not think Chuck Tingle is a person himself. I think Chuck Tingle is a persona of somebody else, is my ultimate assumption. I think I'm probably stating, like, a very obvious fact, but it was just the whole persona, it was everything. I am assuming that, now, forgive me because I don't know anything about this guy or his life, but the way he was speaking in the episode, he reminded me, he reminded me of him, Dr. Steve Brule, and so that's why I'm saying that I think this is some type of persona, and he might actually have, like, a very serious job, or maybe he's well known in other ways, and this is like a persona and something that he's pursuing differently. I don't know. I don't know the full lore on Chuck Tingle or anything about this whole thing. These are just, so don't mind me, these are just my own assumptions and things. Entertaining. Definitely entertaining. I do have plans to listen to all of the episodes of the podcast, and like I said, there aren't that many. Like I said, there's not that many episodes. There's like 15 or 16 episodes, basically, left for me to check out, so I guess you're gonna hear about more of these audiobooks in future videos, because I will inevitably be listening to them while I'm multitasking. What do I say? I've just been talking this whole time. I haven't even told you about what this stupid book is about. Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt is a story of a scientist who is working at a laboratory where they are cloning. They're making some strides in cloning. Trying to clone people. They've kind of cloned people. They're also cloning sentient body parts. Horrifying flesh mounds. Body parts. And in this particular occasion, the scientist, his turn had come up to have something cloned from him, and they cloned his butt. So it is about his sentient butt. And things kind of progress very quickly in Chuck Tingle books, as they do without rhyme or reason. And things did indeed progress quite quickly from the initial meeting of the butt to being attracted to said butt, and said sentient butt also being attracted to the cloned person, the original scientist, and they spend a very interesting evening together in graphic detail, and things, yeah, that's the things, and we always wrap it up with a happy ending, because we have to. It's a given. Yeah, there's questions that I have. Mostly, is it self-love, technically, in a manner of speaking? Another question that might be a little bit racy for me to ask, but is it masturbation if it's a clone of yourself, or is it actually a act? I have a lot of questions, none of which I think are ever going to be answered. Much like any of his books, it leaves you asking a lot of questions and not really knowing the answers, or being afraid to know the answers. I laughed a lot. Maybe shouldn't have been listening to it while at work because of how much I was indeed holding in laughter. Because, sometimes podcasts will make me laugh. I don't know how to explain to any coworkers what I was laughing at if they did indeed ask. So, that was the thing. Um, yeah, very weird. If you don't mind spice, described in lurid detail, and you're here for a laugh and you don't care really about the quality or a book having about as much plot as a porn video, I guess, go for it. It's pure entertainment value. These episodes, by the way, if you want to check out this podcast instead of like reading one of his books somewhere, the podcast episodes are not that long. These are not long books. They are not. I think, what is it? The longest one looks like it might be 45 minutes, perhaps. Yeah, they are not long at all. And I'm sure all of them are highly entertaining because this is the 6th Tingle book that I have read at this point, and bizarre, but entertaining. So, yeah. So it was an eclectic bunch of things that I read in November. Like I said, I think fairly enjoyable overall. But yeah, I guess fairly eclectic with what I did end up reading. I am mildly disappointed that I didn't push myself to read a little bit more this past month, but it just, I don't know, guys, not in the cards for me. We shall see what December looks like. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, please indeed do so. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.